What made me think about it is
Skiing.
just that it's first snow here. And you mentioned you guys having 6 inches of snow already on the ground, and like first snow here immediately makes me think, okay, the lifts are open.
Yeah. They've been open for a little bit. Yeah. What are the immediate things you can cut from your budget when you make a career pivot or leave your job? Ski pass is a pretty easy, for me at least. There are some people where that is something they find a lot of meaning and joy in, and I enjoy it. My marginal level of enjoyment for skiing goes down significantly quicker than a lot of Coloradans, I think. After a few days, I'm like, all right, this was fun. But
I made that case to a friend of mine who got laid off from a tech company that shall be nameless. And I said, you're looking for places to cut. You should probably cut back on your golf. He increased it and said, no, I have more time to play now, and I will actually pay for lessons finally. And I was like, I think you're going the opposite direction of how we started this conversation, but do your thing.
you can give advice, but you can't control.
There you go.
All right, Malcolm, a bunch of stuff I want to talk about today, especially we've got crypto going a little nuts. The back to work story, back to office story is really interesting to me. And then also some of the investing implications of that. Let's go to crypto, because I know this is where you have probably more thoughts than I do. We talked about it a little bit on last week's show, but Bitcoin right now, as of Friday, in the woodshed a little bit. Strategy, the artist formerly known as MicroStrategy, famous for using Bitcoin as collateral to go get loans to buy more Bitcoin. It's not more than 50%, although it's still beating the market on a 5-year period. So I want to give him some credit for that. But I know you have thoughts on this. Even though for me, it seems like Bitcoin kind of a blip, it is a highly volatile asset. Right now, it's in a little bit of a down cycle, but still materially outperforming a lot of stock indexes and other physical assets over longer periods of time. But for some reason, Malcolm, this is interesting to you, and I can't wait to find out why.
Well, for one thing, it's interesting to me that this model where taking on leverage to buy the asset in a closed structure like this always backfires. And I know we're not supposed to use the word always most of the time with things related to investing, because a lot of times two things can be true at the same time. In this case, this is a structure that always backfires, because the asset itself, at some point, like, people get access to it. It becomes utility. And in this case, for the last 4 or 5 years, like before Bitcoin was tradable in Coinbase accounts, and before Bitcoin was tradable in ETFs, those two things are part of what took some of the air out of the sales of this strategy. It's also the grayscale Bitcoin trust that existed once upon a time. And like, it had a premium to it because it had so much leverage on it. So you could actually get more bang for your buck if you bought into that grayscale, Bitcoin trust. Same thing here. We're borrowing money to buy more Bitcoin. We're not even mining them necessarily and creating new ones. We're just buying them as they come available on the market. And that's our strategy. We're borrowing money. We're buying Bitcoin. We're borrowing money. We're buying Bitcoin. So now you're at a place where instead of getting 2 Bitcoins for the price of 1, let's just say for the sake of easy math, you're getting 1 Bitcoin for the price of 2 because of the way that the borrowing has worked inside of there. So now with Bitcoin's price falling, I don't know, was it 30% or something from its all-time high in the last month or so? That made the strategy approach, the MicroStrategy approach, blow up basically. And so now all of us who are observers of this thing, I don't own any Bitcoin as of this recording. I've reserved the right to go buy some if and when this blows up and I say, hey, it's 50% off, it's time to go shopping. But I don't own any Bitcoin right now. But what is interesting about this is if you think about Silicon Valley Bank, right? They had a bank run because all of a sudden the confidence in their customers was rattled. The company had a lot of debt on its balance sheet that it was pegging against, and that was the real security or safety in that bank. And once it became clear that it's not as secure as we thought, all of their customers showed up at their front door saying, hey, we want our money. this is the risk inherent inside of the MicroStrategy approach. I'm trying to like oversimplify. There's a lot more nuance to it than that. But basically, if Bitcoin falls to a certain price, which it sounds like we're very close to hitting, there's a chance that they'll have to sell the Bitcoins they own to pay off the debt. And that's where the price of Bitcoin plunges more, because they're a big holder of these tokens. And the moment those tokens hit the market, it brings down the price. And if it brings down the price, that hurts the leverage again. So now they need to sell some more Bitcoin to pay off some more debt. And again and again and again. And it becomes this vicious circle. And so that's the concern that everyone who's watching this right now, who is in the crypto universe, has. And so part of the thing that's sending the price down further now is people trying to get out before this big wave hits. And that game is kind of leading to what they refer to as a crypto winter. And that is the part that I'm curious and somewhat concerned about, because there are a lot of people that would be hurt if Bitcoin's price continued to cascade down this way.
So MicroStrategy gets into a position where it almost has like a wildcat style banking run, because they've taken out so many loans to buy more Bitcoin. And then there's such a big holder of it that it is material if they are to sell those Bitcoins into the market, which you may have an issue doing just given the amount of Bitcoin they need to sell. It's tough to find oligarchs, maybe. I don't know.
And you don't have a Warren Buffett that says, hey, I want to help avoid a financial crisis here. So I'm going to backstop your Bitcoin with my physical cash, and I'm going to buy shares of your or I'm going to buy warrants to own shares of your company at, 50 cents on the dollar or whatever. And I'm going to convert those warrants in 5 or 10 years once we get out of this crisis. And that's the way that you're going to save yourself from having to kill the entire Bitcoin market. There's not really a whale in that same sense that has the same vested interest. Like there's no Treasury Secretary calling this person to say, hey, can you step in to make sure that Bitcoin doesn't crater? So it is very possible that this thing could happen, even though we look at our traditional financial system and we want to compare it that way and say, well, they would never let that fail. Why would they let this fail?
I hear that. And I also look at Bitcoin. If I just told you the numbers, Bitcoin is down about 13% on the year, or over the past 12 months. It's down about 4% year to date. It hasn't moved over a longer stretch of time. Even if we just go to a year, 12 months, it hasn't moved that violently. And still it's up from, December of 2022, just 3 years ago, it was under $17,000 a coin. Now it's 90,000. There's still been a ton of growth in this thing, Malcolm. And
that's what makes this so interesting to me, and also could completely negate everything I just said. So traditional crypto winter 2018, 2022, 75-80% of the value of Bitcoin got just shaved off the top. Like it literally lost 75-80%. I don't remember exact numbers for both of those years, but in one year it was 75, the other year was 80, I think. I don't know that can happen ever again, because of the level of institutional ownership in Bitcoin now. You have all these gigantic companies that own Bitcoin as part of their treasury. You have all these like institutional investors, family offices, all pension funds, people like that own Bitcoin. You also have backstops in place. You also have a crypto-friendly White House right now. So I don't know that crypto winter can actually happen the way that it has in the past. And maybe those days are behind it because it has created so many institutional guardrails now, or at least backstopping to make sure that there is a floor to which all of those larger dollar participants have to come in and start to buy it up to save it. And I'm curious which direction we go, which is also why I threw out that caveat that I might be buying sometime soon rather than sitting this one out.
And just from watching this market, and I'm not a crypto expert, I've had crypto before. Like you, I currently don't have any, but I would reconsider that. Specifically because I'm hearing from a lot of financial advisors how dangerous and stupid Bitcoin is. And once you start hearing that and once you start seeing that, just traditionally, that's actually been a great time to pick up some Bitcoin when everyone's like, this whole thing's a big Ponzi scheme and you should really just own gold. Nah, that's been a good time to pick up some Bitcoin anytime those people crawl out of the woodwork. Go ahead.
Also, those people say it. I gotta watch how I say it. I gotta watch how I say this one.
All right, message me what you want to say, and then I'll say it for you.
Some of those people will say those things, and then those are the same people investing in the riskiest private credit funds and stuff like that they've moved their clients' money into, but they won't touch crypto because it's too volatile or it's too. That's where the shysters are, not the private credit fund that owns 16 car washes that, is promising an 18% guaranteed return for the next 40 years.
Let's go to this. Anything else on crypto before we get to this meta story? I feel comfortable leaving it there.
Not yet, but I think, I lied. One other thing.
That's why I asked.
We didn't talk about Ethereum at all in this scenario, but that is also where I think the buying opportunity is, because as Bitcoin goes, so goes the price of Ethereum. It's actually been punished even harder than Bitcoin. And I think that might also be where a buying opportunity is. So I don't own either right now. Just putting that out there again, do with it what you will. But I do think that this could be shaping up to be a buying opportunity in either or both.
Do you want to just get some NFTs on the Ethereum? You don't want to use, do you use the Ethereum platform in any capacity?
Probably. I don't know. It underpins a lot of things that we use in the digital world today that we don't necessarily know that we are bumping into. And that's also part of the reason that I think Ethereum could be the more valuable token 10 years from now, because there's a lot more usefulness. And by nature of how it's built, you can't build anything on Bitcoin. So there's no way to extract additional value from developers wanting to come in and build. Ethereum, you can. And so maybe there's an opportunity down the road for Ethereum to even overtake the price of Ethereum to overtake the price of one Bitcoin.
We had an Ethereum convention in Denver last year.
Sounds fun.
That I went to. Is a little reporting trip. And I tried to understand what Ethereum does. Maybe I'm too stupid for it, but I felt like when I was walking through, how when you're in a dream, you actually you can't really read anything. Mm-hmm. So written words are just kind of nebulous and you're just kind of what? If you look at a book, the words are kind of squirmy. That's how I felt walking through this convention, where I'm just I am seeing letters of things that are on your sign. I do not understand what you do other than lend Ethereum to other people, or it's like or it's gambling, or it's like a monetizable video game that's just gambling. So there's this, I go to this booth and this guy is explaining his video game, which is like a soccer video game. And it's kind of rough graphics, but you play soccer. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, and so what you do is you can buy these players and then you have a really good team, and then you can pay for things with Ethereum to build up your team. And I'm like, well, that just sounds like it sucks, because if you play, you're constantly going to be playing against people that are just buying better teams, and it takes out a lot of the skill of the game. Maybe people enjoy it, but that was one of the reasons where I was a little hesitant on it. But I do understand what you're saying, that just because maybe I had one weird experience at a convention, I shouldn't totally write it off.
Yeah, no, but that sounds stupid. I hate to, as the Youngs say, I don't want to yuck your yum, whoever it is that created that, but that just sounds stupid. I'm thinking more along the lines of stable coins and their ability to help us transfer dollars amongst each other, and especially people who are outside of the United States that need to move money around. It's like a 6% fee when you want to send money to your relatives in Mexico. So if we can cut that in half or by a third even, that's a meaningful uptake for the companies that figure, those are the opportunities, I think, in a lot of these digital currencies. Okay. That are underpinned by this blockchain technology. I don't think that creating soccer games where you have better Roblox characters than Roblox has, that sounds like nonsense.
Yeah, I think the payments, I could see a lot of merchants wanting to accept stable coins versus go through the Visa network. I just haven't seen it yet. I think it would take a lot of change.
But no one has more patents on blockchain technologies than Visa and MasterCard.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember the exact number, but it's in the hundreds.
Nice. It all goes back to the institutions even win, even in decentralized finance. Would you look at that? I want to hit this meta story quickly. Yep. because this is, to me, it's interesting. So Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner, he wrote a book on Twitter. Those remember people liking it. And he reported, and this has been twisted, I think, in a lot of headlines that have come out since this reporting, to say that Meta is cutting their metaverse budget by 30%. And that is not what his reporting says. Importantly, it is that executives are considering potential budget cuts as high as 30% for the metaverse group next year. That's Meta Horizon Worlds and its Quest virtual reality unit. This is, either way, though, quite a pivot from a company that literally staked its name on the metaverse. And I know you follow the tech industry even more closely than I do. Zuck doesn't really talk about it in its earnings calls these days. It's just kind of on the name of the company. We're all in on AI right now, not so much metaverse. But what do you make of these? What do you make of these budget cuts over at the metaverse company aptly named Meta?
First of all, I'm curious if we're going to see Alphabet go back to Google at some point and see Meta go back to Facebook at some point. I think so, because people refuse to call it. It's kind of like, Muhammad Ali wanting, Cassius Clay wanting to be Muhammad Ali.
That rebrand really worked, Malcolm.
And the rest of the world eventually, but I mean, it took like a long time. And I see this as that. So anyway, I think, to your point, I think that what is happening is AI is clearly where the company needs to be. Its investments have gotten so heavy that they have to find the money somewhere. The metaverse was the thing that people looked at and said, that's silly. I don't want to hear about that again as a shareholder. They agreed, stopped talking about it so much, and saw their share price go up. Mark Zuckerberg's personal net worth is 100% tied to the success of the share price of META. And so anything that helps to make that go higher and helps make him in contention for the richest man in the world someday, that obviously is where the focus goes. And I also think that they've spent so much money acqui-hiring all these AI talents. The money had to come from somewhere, like I said. So all these big splashy, we just stole this person, this designer away from Apple as an example, which happened earlier this week. That money has to come from somewhere. And so why not pull it from the place that people have already, your shareholders have already let you know that they have zero interest in being a part of, especially when you can always just take the best parts of what the metaverse was going to be and move them over to your AI lab anyway. So the glasses aren't going away necessarily. I think they're doubling down actually on that effort. And it's because Meta needs a device that they can have you tap into the ecosystem from that is not your iPhone. Because the Apple App Store takes 30 cents on the dollar from every single dollar that transfers from your pocket to the app that you're using. And that hurts them tremendously. From an ego perspective, Mark Zuckerberg's been vocal about how much he hates it. He hates having to pay Tim Cook for that access. He wishes he had created the device that gives you the access to the rails. And I think this is them trying to rewrite that history. This is them trying to get you connected to the Facebook ecosystem without having to pay Tim Cook. And I do think that it makes perfect sense to spend the dollars in that direction when you consider how many of supposedly the smartest minds in AI and design and everything else are convinced that the way that we interact with AI and the next device isn't going to be the phone in your pocket. It's going to be something else, whether it's a watch, glasses, or some other kind of wearable. And so if any or all of that is true, it makes sense to me that they would be spending all of their efforts in that direction and forget this metaverse thing. Nobody wants to hang out with their friends virtually that way. They've told you that. Other companies have tried it and failed. Let's move on.
A lot there. First of all, I still can't get over that you've compared Facebook's name change to Meta to a Olympic boxer who converted to Islam and then, due to his moral beliefs, decided to not go to Vietnam. He didn't go to Vietnam. He didn't want to do a tour there, so he has to sit out the prime of his heavyweight career, makes a tremendous sacrifice, changes his name. There's some racist white guys that don't want to call him Muhammad Ali. They still call him Cassius Clay.
Going. It wasn't just them. It was a lot of people also in the Black community who refused to acknowledge his name change because they had known him and loved him as Cassius for so many years. That's all I was saying.
I got to rewatch.
His daddy calls him Clay. I call him Clay. That was the response initially.
Yeah. We could have also, we got Mile High Stadium in Denver. They call it Empower Field now. A lot of people still call it Mile High Stadium. I think the glasses may not get Meta away from the App Store as much as they want. I wonder if that will just continue to be a niche product for, we talk about how many billions of dollars they pour into that, but it's still fighting a fundamental truth, which is that people are sensitive to what they put on their face. And I think there is also a social cost to wearing the Meta glasses.
I've heard Scott Galloway talk about that a lot, about how, like, as guys, the thing that we're always trying to do is signal to, as young guys, the thing that we're always trying to do is signal to women that, hey, I am attractive. I am someone you should invest time in. I am someone who should be getting your attention, right? If you think about a peacock spreading its feathers, and anything that takes away from your ability to signal that as a young man, you're immediately not interested in that. And how dorky putting these giant glasses that are tethered to a battery pack in the case of Apple would be, and say the opposite of what you're actually trying to communicate. I think that it makes a ton of sense when you consider the first adopters you would hope are probably the youngs who are going to be on TikTok talking about how much they love this product. And so anything that goes in the opposite direction of that is unlikely to have the uptake that you're looking for.
Well, and it's not just a sex thing. So let me go away from the Galloway take. If I walk up to you and I pull out my phone and I'm like, "Hey, Malcolm," you would say, whoa. Am I on camera right now? Mm-hmm. And when you wear the Meta glasses, every single person you interact with is, I think, immediate. Not every single person. If I recognize that someone has the Meta glasses and they're walking up to me, my question is am I being recorded right now? And granted, when I'm out in public, you accept that you're being recorded anyway. But I think the Meta glasses, it's going to be difficult to overcome that social barrier that's kind of confrontational when you walk up to someone. They're just like, "Oh yeah, I'm just recording this interaction we have."
That's because you're old.
It's because I'm old.
I think Gen Z has less concerns over their privacy than you and I do. I think that even younger people, Gen Alpha, whose entire life has been on camera in some instances because their parents have been so desperate to turn them into YouTube sensations, that someone walking up to you with glasses on is just one more opportunity to go viral. And they may be thinking about it in those terms. So I don't know. I'm no psychologist. I'm no futurist even. I just think that there is a world, it's possible that there is a world where people aren't as offended and it's not as much of a social issue. And the reason I say that is because you and I are in so many places now where people have their phones out, like you just had your phone up. People listening to this can't see that you held your phone up to me. But
did I communicate it well enough orally?
No, I don't think so.
Pretending to okay, thank you. Good constructive feedback.
It used to be jarring when you would be in a place and a person would hold up their phone and you know that you're in this shot that this person is taking. You're like, "Yo, what are you doing?" Mm-hmm. Now we see it. We might roll our eyes. I might tap my wife and go, "What's wrong with them?" But it's just become part of society and we've learned to live with it. And I think maybe that's where we ultimately head with things like cameras embedded in your glasses that just are always on.
So if you're one of the youngs or you just have feedback on the show, constructive feedback like Malcolm just gave me about a bit I was trying to do on camera, thistimepod@gmail.com is a good place to send us emails, thistimepod@gmail.com. And after that, I do want to disagree with you on one thing.
This episode is sponsored by Capital Area Planning Group. Capital Area Planning Group is a fiduciary wealth management firm that specializes in helping high net worth individuals and families navigate the complexities that come along with managing concentrated stock options, multiple income streams, and an ever-changing tax code. While our team of certified financial planners are well-versed in all things personal finance, our areas of expertise include equity compensation, estate planning, and multi-year tax planning. At Capital Area Planning Group, we believe in pricing transparency. That's why our fees are posted on our website, right alongside the various services we perform on behalf of our clients throughout the year. If you're tired of receiving the same cookie-cutter advice from your financial advisor, then don't wait. Reach out to us today at capgllc.com to experience a better approach to wealth Wealth Management. Again, that web address is www.capgllc.com.
I think that's a very cynical perspective on the youngs, on the Gen Zs, Gen Alphas. And one of the trends we've seen, I think, with a lot of social media usage, especially among younger people, is they've gotten a little more private about it. There is a lot of younger people that want to be, what is it, like the number one job people want to be is an influencer, which don't want to tramp on that. I'm on a podcast trying to make money from it. So let me, I'm not gonna yuck that yum. However, a lot of social media usage it's in private forums with their friends. It's on Roblox chats. It's on, Discord is a very popular one. It's Finstas. It's a lot of private accounts where they're using it to interact with their friends, but it's not just I'm posting something publicly on Facebook with my political opinions, if you will. So we'll see. Let's do this.
I need more young people in my life.
Let's do this work from home story. Or I guess actually last thing on this. I do have one last question. Are you actually bullish that Meta can get away from the App Store?
I am bullish that they will continue to spend whatever it takes to figure it out. So okay. I guess in a roundabout way, my answer is yes. I don't think they can ever get completely away from it because Apple has a hold on all of us. I'm saying us as an iPhone user and you as an iPhone user. And I think it's obvious how strong their hold is when you consider the Pixel and the Note. Like they're 2 years ahead of everything the iPhone does from a features perspective. Like they've got commercials out now where they're literally taking direct shots at iPhone users saying like your phone is plain vanilla. It's boring. It's dumb. It's stupid. And look at you standing in line to get the next one. And we all watch those commercials and go, so? And so I think that Apple has such a stronghold that it's unlikely they'll unseat the App Store completely, but it is possible that they could even take 10% ownership back, and that would even be something.
Well, it goes back to the fundamental truths. People don't want to put things on their face that may make them look dorky. With my iPhone, you can tell me that I look stupid with my iPhone, but guess what? I want to be a blue message. I don't want to be a green message because it's like the what's the Dr. Seuss story where everyone has like the symbol on their tummy, and so they want to all get that symbol. Then they change it and they want to get that symbol on their tummy. We're not as far away from that as people may want to think they are. Let's do this work from home story. Recent survey. I thought this was surprising. So there's a work from home story in the New York Times that I think had kind of a funny title. It is "Working from Home is Harming Young Employees." They're starting to see that. Pandemic started, what was it, May of 2020? So we're about 5.5 years away. We're starting to realize that there's some tremendous social costs to it. And I've seen conflicting evidence on this that I can get into, but this data point really surprised me. It was a recent survey from Jones Lang LaSalle, and they have found that more than half of Fortune 100 companies, so 50 at least of the Fortune 100, had asked desk-using employees, which is how I'm going to start identifying myself, to work in the office 5 days a week versus 5% in 2023. That sounds a little odd to me. I don't know if it's entirely true. How about you?
I am not surprised. I am, so as a person who employs people younger than myself, I have the same beliefs. And I don't know if it's because of how the early parts of my career were shaped by being in the office 100%. And I saw the value of that. Or if I just read things that are written in the New York Times and believe them or what. But like to me, and so we have a hybrid work system where 2 days out, 3 days in, and the 3 days in are intended to be like you can bump into someone else and transfer knowledge in a way that you can't do over Zoom. Like that's the best way I can simplify it down into, one talking point. And I think that that's probably the crux of the argument of the article that you're talking about. The youngs are realizing that their careers aren't progressing as fast as they would like them to. And instead of 4 years ago where people were pointing at them and saying, your career's not going to progress as fast as you wanted to. And they said, you don't know what you're talking about, old dude, get out of the way. now it's becoming obvious, and it's becoming obvious too that it's their own doing. And I think that maybe is where this is coming around to.
I think that's true. I mean, I have primarily worked remotely since the pandemic, and I think that has come. There are benefits for us to do this show remotely. I think it would be, like, bluntly, I think there are things we miss by not being in I'm in Denver, you're in DC. We're able to do this show because of remote technology. There are also things we miss by not being in a room together or bumping into each other by, talking about a certain story before we do it. I still think it's like you're trying to replicate it though, right? So you end up in a place where you're trying to replicate and make up for it in a remote environment where you can do that. But your social circle becomes much smaller. So
I look at companies where people brag, we're 100% remote, and we just had this company retreat and it was completely remote, and we did it a whole day over Zoom together. And I look at that and that's stupid.
Yeah.
Like, to your point about trying to replicate the real thing, like, just have the real thing.
I've been in those situations where you're playing a game on Zoom and you're like, I would rather be doing anything else than doing this word puzzle game with 10 other people. Because the other thing too, it's the sound of it. And this sounds silly, but it's not. If in a group of 10 people, you can go to one area and then you're not exactly hearing everyone else. But on Zoom, everyone's sound is the same and at max volume. So only one person can talk to the group at the same time.
But you got breakout rooms.
Yeah. You can't have breakout rooms.
You can go to Zoom rooms.
But that's my point, is everything is trying to replicate it. The study, though, that conflicts with this is there's another, it was from SAP, 70% of Fortune 500 companies allow hybrid work for managers and professional workers. I think that this may go together, though, which is that more companies are trying to ask people to come in 5 days a week. However, they are allowing, the higher you are, the more you get exceptions, right? If you need to work remotely a little bit and you're talented, we'll let you do it. But I think you're absolutely right in that just not only working from home for the social connection, but that was one of the reasons I realized about a month ago that I needed to get a co-working membership. Because I was at a place where I'm like, I literally, for me to focus on things, sometimes I need to get out of my cave. And I need to be in a physical place where I can separate. Like, this is my monkey brain knows that I need to be in a physical place where this is where I do work and not watch TV or do the dishes and the laundry. Not that I'm doing that during the workday necessarily. Dishes I'm working on, but being in a physical place where you can just have that mind shift makes you a more effective worker. And there are studies on that generally, it was some economists looked at call center employees, and they found that those people who worked in a physical place were taking more calls. They got fewer callbacks, meaning that the people who were on the call with them got the accurate information they needed. Though they were quick to point out, there is selection bias there. The people who are saying, I want to go show up in person with the chance of getting promotion, and I want to get in the car and go be with other people, there may be a selection bias that those people are willing to work harder anyway than people who work from home. So there's a question mark there. And I've seen plenty of people who work intensely, diligently, and are productive from home. And the one other thing that was surprising to me from this study is that for coders, the people who were physically close together actually communicated digitally more. So you bump into someone at the office, you ask a question, and then you learn you can ask more follow-up questions because you have that warm relationship versus that awkward Slack interaction where you're like, hey, nice to meet you. I need something from you. All right, bye.
That's why I say the hybrid approach, I think, makes the most sense. Like, I agree. Get things done remotely. I'm on an Amtrak to New York once a week to do CNBC, but those 3 hours in both directions, I get to sit. I'm in Slack having conversation with the team. I'm actually working on something that's, on my laptop screen, but physically in the office too, we can follow up on the thing that we were talking about over Slack, or the other way around. We can initiate the project in person and then follow-up questions happen over Slack like you're talking about. So I think there's a world where both make sense, but specifically for people who are in the first 5 years of their career, having the ability to go ask a grown-up, and I don't say that as like a put down, I say that in its almost literal sense, having the ability to go ask a person who is 20 years your senior in this particular industry or in this particular role is something that you cannot do virtually, because virtually that person has no time for you. They're doing their own laundry and dishes at home when they're working from home in the middle of whatever work they have to do, or they're dealing with their kids, or they're dealing with whatever. Whereas in the office, I can look through the glass and see, oh, Jim's off the phone. Let me run in there and see if I can get him for 5 minutes. Oh, Jen's running down the hallway to her next meeting. Let me run with her and ask her my question on her way there. But if you hit me on Slack and say, hey, when do you have 5 minutes? My answer to you would probably be, ask me on Thursday of next week between 12 and 4. Like, that's the thing that actually helps boost your career very early on, is having those organic bump in moments where knowledge transfer can happen. And then also when you talk about finding a sponsor inside of your organization, so not a mentor who's going to say nice things to you and help you figure out the bathroom code, but an actual sponsor who's going to say nice things about you to other people on their level when you're not in the room. That can't happen if that person doesn't spend any time with you physically, learning about who you are, what you're good at, seeing how you take advice, how do you apply their recommendations, all those kinds of things. And so those are the things that helped me very early on in my career. It's again the reason that I was very skeptical when I heard people saying, I will not take a job that's not 100% remote. Yeah, I just graduated 2 weeks ago and I don't know how to do anything in the work setting. I only know what I learned in school. I don't care. I will not take a job that's not 100% remote, and you can't make me. That was the stance of a lot of people that I talked to and read about and observed and everything else in 2021, 2022, 2023. And my boomer millennial self was saying, okay, you're going to pay for it. And I think to the point of this article and others that I've read recently, like this is not just one data point. We're having that reckoning where people are realizing that they have harmed themselves.
I mean, I realized it pretty early, I think, into the pandemic, that I was like, I think this working from home stuff is going to come at a cost, even though there have been some tremendous benefits, especially in the world of podcasting. Your ability to get like guests and broaden your network is tremendously different when you have people who can do things remotely. To your point of, you're talking about broad network things that come from working in person. I've traditionally worked on very tight teams. I think those can be effective remotely, just because if you're primarily working with, let's say, 2 to 5 people and you're remote with them, and you do have that downtime where you're on meetings, you're doing a lot of check-ins, you're working on something. In my case, it was kind of creative. You're able to build those relationships, I think, still pretty effectively remotely, even though it may be, let's say, 70 to 85% of the way there, not the 100% you're talking about being in person, but there are ways to make it a little easier on yourself.
Also, to the point you were making about like seeing other people working, the impact of that. Like my very early years of my career when I started at Merrill Lynch, like it was, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us in cubicles right next to each other who would like literally compete to be the first person in the office that morning and the last person leaving that evening. And just knowing that the person on the other side of the cubicle wall is still over there working is enough to motivate you to keep working. And even those little things have an impact on your success early on, because if I see you doing it, I'm going to keep doing it. If I'm at home in a silo, well, at 4:30, I don't know whether anybody's still working or not, but I want to watch Stranger Things. And so I'm going to turn on Netflix and call it a day.
Let's get to the investing angle, which I think is kind of interesting, because even though this trend has continued that we've talked about from the social perspective, the career perspective, a lot of investors are completely or still pretty uninterested in the real estate investment trusts that own, especially like the nice office buildings. So I looked at a few of them, and I don't own any of these. This is something that I reserve the right to change my mind on. But I'm also wondering if this is something where it's like, all right, you're trying to do a bunch of math for maybe a 10 to 20% return over 2 to 5 years. And these historically have not been market outperforming investments. But I think this is interesting. So Empire State Realty Trust, which owns appropriately the Empire State Building. Speaking of brands that will never rename, if you own the Empire State Building, don't take that out of your name, Empire State Realty Trust. Another New York City office space. June of 2022, they were 84% occupied, which is still pretty high for the doldrums of work from home from all of the youngins demanding remote or nothing. October of 2025, 90%. So moving up a little bit. And then Cousins Properties, which does nice office buildings with that work, live, play type of vibe where we have a gym here and some restaurants on the bottom floor and top floor stuff in places like Phoenix, Arizona, office space in the top floors. In places like Phoenix, Arizona, they found that new office supply is now actually shrinking. They're also 92% leased up. But the difference is that the case that they're trying to make to investors is, hey, remember all of that negativity about office buildings a few years ago? Now the demand is coming back and none of the developers were starting. I mean, imagine pitching to developers in late 2021 to mid 2023. Hey, I needed a few $100 million to go construct a brand new office building. So there's been a huge decline in the amount of office buildings coming up. And there's also this shift that we've talked about of more people are going back to the office in at least a hybrid setting. So this is something that I haven't pulled the trigger on, but it's got me a little interested because I think this is something where there's a trend that investors may be specifically undervaluing right now.
So the trend that you're saying is investors aren't paying enough attention to real estate investment trusts specifically that own office specifically.
Nice office, like Class A.
Got it.
Manhattan built, like buildings in Manhattan or, the nice parts of the Sun Belt where people want to go into, not the, Class B space that are, 35 minutes away from the city in a building that might be 30 to 50 years old, which are those like tall-ish office buildings that look like they're in the middle of nowhere and have no outside space. So these are the investment trusts that specifically look at the primo nice things. And a lot of these, not that this is the best way to look at this, but a lot of these stocks are at almost book value. So the Empire State Realty Trust, Empire State Building, plus some other stuff in and around Manhattan is at like 1.1 times book value. Cousins trades at a slight discount. That doesn't automatically mean it's a good investment idea because that could mean that investors are appropriately saying, who know more about this stuff than I do, they are appropriately saying, yeah, the accounting value of your buildings doesn't match what I have on my books, and my books are actually correct. But I think it is a reason to investigate it a little further.
So I'm not giving financial advice on this show.
We got a lot of disclaimers here.
But I think that a good approach to REITs, if you're going to own them through a fund, is maybe to focus on an ETF that's actively managed or a mutual fund that's actively managed that can make these tilts tactically on a regular enough basis that you're always on the right side of right or more often than not. And what I mean by that is if I bought a REIT that specifically owns office buildings in Manhattan, I'm going to get the last 4 years included in that bucket. And I'm going to have to suffer the 4 years of office building winter, for lack of a better way to say it. Like there was really some truth to the idea that it's a terrible time to be a landlord and own these Class A buildings in Midtown Manhattan even, because people aren't physically in the office. People aren't wanting to take new leases. People, like, all those things were true. So you had to suffer through the terrible time to get to the good time. Whereas the actively traded mutual funds and ETFs that operate in this space, I've talked to several mutual fund managers during this time period that were bragging our office space ownership is only 1%, is only 2%, is only 5% of the fund. We're more heavily invested in like grocery anchored retail. We're more heavily invested in like senior 55 plus senior living communities, and we're more heavily invested in hospital centers. And like, so there's always a tactical shift in who owns what in the real estate space. And I would much rather own something like that that's actively going to where the puck is going instead of being fixed in a place and being exposed to a region or a sector or a whatever.
I think even with Mamdani, Manhattan office buildings are going to be okay 5 to 10 years from now. But I hear what you're saying, and I think that it is worth it as well, just because, you know, I would rather pay an investment cost for someone to go through the individual office buildings of, let's say, the Sun Belt area and say, no, this is actually the value of them, than trying to do that myself. So,
you know, since we're talking about it, now you've given me the opportunity to get a little bit wonkier. One of the things that I see that gives me a little bit of concern now is how much a lot of these real estate investment trust mutual funds and ETFs have over-indexed toward single family home ownership. And the way that they said, well, we no longer own office space, or we only own 2 to 5% office space, and more of what we own is in the rental space. But what they meant by rental, when I looked under the hood a little closer, was they're buying literal single family homes and packaging them up by region. And so there's thousands of homes owned in like the Atlanta area, the Phoenix, Arizona area, the Austin, Texas area, wherever they wanted to focus, where they own thousands of homes in that place inside of that real estate investment trust. And if and when something comes for that one geographical location, well, it's 35% of the fund now. So you can't say, oh, well, we only own a small slice of whatever when the housing market has its issues in that particular locale. And that bothers me a little bit. Like real estate, I'd rather it be a little bit more diversified geographically, because just as location can be a good thing, it can also cut the other way and be a bad thing.
All right, let's leave it there. I'm at Rick So Slick on X. You can find me, Ricky Mulvey, on LinkedIn. Malcolm is Malcolm on Money, most places. And thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
Information shared in this recording and by its guests represent the views and opinions of the guests and does not represent the views or opinions of the host. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This content is not, nor is it intended to be, a substitute for professional financial advice. It is always recommended that you seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your personal financial situation.